Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's March 12, 2020, and this is episode 698. This week we revisit the snow monkeys and Hokkaido on my third and final Japan Winter Wildlife Tour for 2020. This is always an incredibly busy time of year for me with 3 tours back to back, but it's also a highlight of my year, as I meet all of the wonderfully talented and interesting guests that kindly participate in my tours, and this year was no exception. Our patience wasn't tried by delayed flights, and although I've decided to change the second wildlife tour to a landscape tour for 2021, the reduction in overseas visitors as the coronavirus took hold actually made our trip more enjoyable, although I would have preferred it to have been for different reasons. Our first day with the snow monkeys on this trip was very similar to the first trip because there was again no snow. Even without the snow though, these guys weren't just monkeys. The opportunities that open up for us are different, but depending on how you approach it, definitely still worth being there. As with this first image, there was once again a warm coloured background with the darker coloured top as well as the less diffused light, creating a beautiful rim light with the monkey's fur. This is a comparatively light coloured monkey anyway, which helps, but with well-controlled exposure, the results can be really nice. The only challenge was getting a monkey in a position where the background was far enough away to be completely blurred and with enough contrast to form the rim light. I often find that even when exposing to the right so that the histogram information is just touching the right shoulder, the monkey's face can still be slightly dark. So I generally tweak the shadow slider in Capture One Pro to bring that back out. And that's the same if you're using Lightroom. That didn't work as usual in this case though, because I wanted to keep the top of the background dark. So rather than just increasing the shadow slider for the entire image, I painted in an adjustment mask just around the monkey's face and increased the shadows on the mask instead. That enabled me to brighten the face without increasing the darkness of the background and losing some of that contrast that I was enjoying working with. Another thing that I always enjoy doing is walking down into the valley next to the river to see what is happening there, away from the hot spring pool that's so popular. On our first day, we were treated with a pair of young monkeys grooming, and I just love the pensive look on the larger monkey's face here, but more so the completely relaxed, almost meditative mood of the monkey being groomed. I also really liked the background in this shot too. Once again, it was far enough away to be nice and blurred, but the pale brown tones make a nice change from the white, as much as I do love it when these guys are against the white snow. Talking of snow, although it wasn't as much as forecast, it actually did snow overnight after our first day, and we were rewarded with some snow-covered patches as well as a bit of falling snow on our main full day with the monkeys, as you can see in this next image. The snow is a little dirty, and I have to admit I cloned out 2 tiny triangular gaps in the snow where the rocks showed through, but it was nice to be able to get an almost completely white background for the first time this season. It had snowed during the 2.5 weeks that we had between the 2 trips, so it wasn't a completely snowless year, but it was the first snow that I'd had, so it was nice to see. You can see from this next image though that the valley walls were still very much bare, with just a few patches of snow here and there. It takes a lot more snow than we'd had, and really multiple snowfalls to cover the valley walls. A scuffle in the pool resulted in this mother and baby getting out, so as the young one clung to its mother for warmth, she surveyed the area and situation, trying to figure out what to do next. As much as I enjoy intimately close images of my subject, I do really enjoy placing them in their environment like this as well, giving the viewers of our images more context. Although, as with most photographs, it's always about how much the photographer wants you to see. Most people don't realise just how crowded this location can get, because most of the photographs you see are just of the animals. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this monkey is somewhat isolated in the mountains, when the reality is that to the left of this scene there are probably between 50 and 100 people standing around with some form of imaging device and a huge smile on their faces. That's fine, of course. I have a huge smile on my face too most of the time while I'm with the monkeys. The point is that we show what we want to show, and it can sometimes be deceiving, like the pose in this next shot. Everyone that sees this, including me when it happened, and when people look at the photo, recall the end of the Rocky movie, generally accompanied by a corny impression of Stallone calling out to Adrian. Once again, these primates proved to be some of our closest cousins, and for once it wasn't a fleeting moment. This monkey held her arms up for perhaps 20 seconds, then moved around to face the other side, giving us plenty of opportunities to record her proud pose. Happy that we'd got some snow and some nice monkey photos, we headed back to Tokyo, and thankfully our flight was not delayed this time, so we made our way up to Hokkaido on schedule on the 4th morning of the tour, and made our way straight to the Red Crown Cranes, which continued to provide us with abundant photography opportunities. The light was a little harsh at times though, so for this first photo I actually drew a mask over the foreground and then reduced the clarity to try and take a little bit of the edge off of the crunchy looking snow. It was nice to see the cranes dancing together, and many times on this trip they were kind enough to do it without other cranes getting in the way. I put this post together in a bit of a jumbled order as I selected my images, and came back to this point after writing the rest of the post, as I now know that I have way too many crane shots to share by the end of this episode. I still have 18 other images in addition to the rest of the shots that we'll look at today, so I'm giving up on trying to keep this series to just 2 episodes, unless I can do a really good job of holding myself back on the swans and eagles later. I'll cheat with the next shot too, sharing 3 images in one. It can be a lot of fun to just make portraits of the cranes that get close enough to fill the frame with just parts of their bodies. The obvious shots are the head and the graceful poses that these cranes make as they go about their tasks, such as grooming and eating. I was trying to decide which one of these images to share and couldn't, so decided to go with all 3 as a triptych. I anguished for a while over the order in which to place the images, but decided to just go with chronological order from left to right, as their flow became too choreographed each time I tried to do something that should have made more sense. These photos were all shot at 560mm with my Canon 200 to 400mm lens with the 1.4 times extender. I actually found myself using a second extender for a focal length of 280 to 560mm with the internal extender disengaged, but then having the option to flip it back in for a focal length range of 392mm to 784. The image quality drops very slightly for some images, but the autofocus is still very snappy, although slightly more error-prone than when just using the internal extender. Here's another shot made at 784mm, with both the internal and external 1.4 times extenders engaged. I'm sure you'll agree that the image quality is there, making this a viable way of shooting. I just really enjoy getting in close like this for some of my shots, especially with subjects as beautiful as these red-crowned cranes. On the second day in Hokkaido, we visited the bridge in the town of Tsurui, where the red-crowned cranes sleep in the river, in what is supposed to be their safe haven. It would be if it wasn't for the atrocious behaviour of a select few visitors from neighbouring countries. A few years ago, some Korean men dressed as government workers and went down under the bridge to get a photograph of the birds from a different angle. Although, the moment they did, the birds flew away and many didn't return for a number of weeks. This year, a Chinese man hired a taxi from Kushiro City to take him to the car park, where he sat down his drone and proceeded to fly it down the river, once again startling the cranes, forcing them further back than ever. The cranes all used to roost where this foreground crane is now in this photo, and when they ventured closer to the bridge, they were only around 20 or 30 metres away, sometimes closer. These days though, after repeated abuses, they rarely come even this far forward. I love this photo, but it completely saddens me to think that these locations are being completely ruined by the actions of just a few irresponsible people looking for a few seconds of video or something different, and I'm holding up air quotes here. Before long, the cranes will roost completely around that distant bend in the river, and there will be nothing but trees and water and a bridge full of disappointed photographers. I don't like to call out people by their nationality, as it really is just a select few, but it seems that people from neighbouring countries are the main perpetrators in these irresponsible acts, and I for one would love it if someone was able to educate them a little bit more on how to behave around wild animals. If you think highly enough of something to want to photograph it, surely it isn't too much of a stretch of the imagination to want to keep it safe and protected. Or maybe the drive for being here in the first place is more about just needing a shot that your photography buddies have, and is completely unrelated to any kind of admiration for the subjects. And to be fair, I'm probably thinking this way purely because we are neighbours, as I am sure there are photographers in other countries that sometimes go too far to get the shot. To me, there are no photographs that are worth disturbing the animals to the degree that some people tend to be okay with. We visited the Ural owl's nest that I know of in the area the previous day, and being late in the season and warmer than usual, there were no owls there. After breakfast on the second day though, we went back, and the pair were sitting in their tree, looking as cute as ever. Being nocturnal, they sleep mostly during the day, but the larger female owl opened her eyes for a few moments to look down at something, before closing them again for the rest of our visit. For this shot, I'd used both the internal 1.4 times extender and an external 2 times extender, for a focal length of 1120 millimeters. That really is pushing it, but most of the time, the images are still pretty sharp, as long as you have a fast enough shutter speed and accurate focusing. As my 2021 Japan Winter Wildlife Tour is already sold out, if you'd like to join me on this tour, please take a look at the 2022 tour page at mbp.ac/ww2022, or check out my tours page at mbp.ac/tours for a link to everything that's currently available. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favourite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye bye.